everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be giving you some book recommendations that center around people of color and LGBT themes. Now, my original plan when I first planned this video back a month or two ago was to do a video centering around LGBT reads featuring LGBT characters written by LGBT authors because June is Pride Month. But with everything that's been going on in America lately and in the world in general, I do think that it's important to highlight books that center around characters of color or have been written by authors of color. So I thought that I would just combine both of these since I am doing fewer videos than usual in June. Typically, I would do two separate videos for each of these really important topics, but I thought that I would just make them into one video for you guys. So the way that I'm going to go about this is for each category, I'm going to be giving you 5 books that I have read and very, very much enjoyed, and then 5 books that I still hope to get to that centers around these topics. Now, before we even get into the video, I just want to put an entire huge disclaimer on this video. I will fully admit that I am not as educated in either of these fields as I feel like I should be, particularly when it comes to reading authors of color and reading about characters of color. I'm honestly kind of embarrassed on how few books I have read that centers around this really important topic. So please just forgive me for any ignorance or anything that I say that might not come off in the best way. I am still learning. I am working to educate myself every day, as I feel like we all should be. I really just want this video to serve as a reminder to me of the effort that I still need to make and the progress that I still need to make in order to try to put these reads more into my radar and just make a greater effort to be picking up some of these novels. And I also want to say I want to keep the comments of this video a really, really positive space. I think that we are all in a different place on our journey to be keeping these matters at the forefront of our minds, and just be respectful in the comments to me and to anybody else that you might see down there. I don't want this video to be a place of hate. I just want us to all be lifting each other up, encouraging each other to get educated like we should be. Let's keep it a positive environment. With all that being said, and without further ado, let's get started. So I do want to start out by talking about some books that either center around characters of color, have been written by authors of color. So I'm gonna start out by telling you 5 books in that category that I have read and very much enjoyed. So the first book that I'm gonna be talking about is pretty much on everybody's list at this point, and that is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. Now, The Hate U Give follows our main character, Star, and towards the beginning of the novel, she gets in the car with her friend Khalil. They wind up getting stopped by a white police officer, and there's an altercation. The officer winds up killing Khalil, even though he is unarmed and has not done anything wrong. It becomes national news, and Star finds herself in the spotlight. Now, this is a novel that I feel like a lot of people have already read and maybe seen the movie, and it is phenomenal. I feel like it does a really, really nice job of bringing this really horrific incident to light and how unfortunate it is that this happens at all, let alone to the degree that it does. And it really just puts a spotlight on something that a lot of us, I feel like, try to push under the rug and not think about because it makes us uncomfortable. This book really puts it in your face and says, even if you're uncomfortable, this is something that we need to talk about, but it does it in a really respectful way, and just something that I feel like a lot of people can relate to or identify with. Star, I absolutely loved as a main character. I feel like all the characters in this novel are really, really well written. Angie Thomas just has a beautiful way of bringing the characters and their environment to life for you. I feel like she is just really, really talented at bringing you into her world and helping you to kind of get acquainted with the circumstances, even if it's not the environment that you live in. I feel like she just does a really good job all around. And On the Come Up is another one that she's written that I've really, really enjoyed. She's got another one coming out in early 2021 that I'm definitely gonna be picking up, but I feel like this is a staple, the #1. If you are looking for a book to read about the Black Lives Matter movement, this is definitely one that you should pick up or reread if you feel the need to do that. The next book that I wanna talk about is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. Now, this is a book that's written in verse, and it follows our main character, Will. Towards the beginning of the novel, we find out that Will's brother has been shot and killed, so Will is now on his way to kill the guy that killed his brother. So throughout the course of the novel, Will gets on an elevator and he's going from the top floor down to the first floor of the building, which is where he plans to find the guy that he is going to kill. But at every floor, the elevator stops and somebody else from Will's life gets on and they talk, and then has his mind made up by the time he gets to the bottom floor. Now, this was my first experience with Jason Reynolds, and I adored his writing style. The verse aspect of this, just the way that it's written, lends itself really, really well to the storyline. And I feel like Jason Reynolds has done a really nice job discussing the topic of toxic masculinity and how it has affected young Black men. I felt like it was just really well thought out and really well done. And in a verse novel like this, you can tell that the author took his time to pick every single word exactly the way that he wanted it, and it was really, really masterfully done. Next, I would like to talk about Dear Martin by Nick Stone. Now, this book follows our main character, Justice, and he is a high school student that has his life all planned out. He gets very good grades and takes his education very seriously. He wants to go to an Ivy League school, and he is kind of picked on by his friends for this, but he is willing to put that aside because he knows what he wants. And the title of this book comes from Justice writing letters to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., kind of discussing his feelings and what he's having to go through and kind of the dichotomy between what is expected of him and what he wants for himself. But then one day, Justice gets in the car with his friend Manny. They're driving around. The music is pretty loud, but they're not doing anything wrong. They set off the fury of this white cop. Shots are fired. Chaos ensues, and we get to follow Justice with the media fallout from that. Now, one thing that I really did appreciate about this one is obviously there are a lot of really hard issues tackled in this book, but we also get to see Justice struggling with things that every teenager deals with, like getting into college, keeping his grades up, trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. I feel like Nick Stone did a really good job of balancing the two issues and not taking away from the stronger racial topics that are being discussed. So in no way does Nick Stone say that those issues are less important than him trying to get into college, but it's just balanced in a really nice way, and a lot of care is taken in both of those topics. There is also a sequel. I'm not sure if it's a direct sequel or a companion novel to this book, but it's going to be called Dear Justice, and it comes out in September of this year, so I'm really looking forward to that one as well. Next, I want to discuss Becoming by Michelle Obama. Now, this is obviously Michelle Obama's memoir. I read this one not too long ago. I think it was in March, and I listened to it on audio. We essentially get to follow Michelle as she is growing up as a young girl in Chicago. She grows up, goes to law school, eventually meets Barack Obama, and becomes the First Lady of the United States. I wanted to put this book on this list because I very, very much admire Michelle Obama. I always have ever since she and President Obama moved into the White House, and I've always looked up to her, and I feel like this book does a really nice job of not only talking about her high moments, but really also discussing the lows in her life as well. She does not shy away from telling you about her struggles and the issues that she's had to deal with. And I feel like she just does a beautiful job of explaining the struggles that she has gone through, and not the entire book focuses on one particular topic. So she talks about being a woman, she talks about being Black, she talks about being a first lady, and the individual struggles that she had to deal with because of all of those individual things, which I feel like really helped to make the memoir really well-rounded. This is another one that I feel like a lot of people have read, but some people I feel like also shy away from it, maybe because they were not in favor of the Obama administration or they just don't like memoirs. But regardless, I feel like this is one that anybody can benefit from. There is a lot of conversation that goes on in this novel, and I feel like in general it just gives this sense of hope to the reader. So if you haven't picked it up yet, it's a little bit lengthy, but I would definitely recommend it. And the last one that I want to discuss that I have read is Loving versus Virginia by Patricia Fruby Powell. Now, this is a verse novel that is a true story, kind of a dramatization of this real court case called Loving versus Virginia. Now, the story follows our main characters Richard and Mildred Loving, who are an interracial couple, and at the time of the novel, I believe it's set in 1955, they were not allowed to legally be married in the state of Virginia. Their case wound up going to the Supreme Court and completely changing the atmosphere, and it was a really, really powerful story. I absolutely loved listening to this one on audiobook. I feel like the verse format again lent itself really, really well to this story, and this is a Supreme Court case that I was not familiar with before I read this novel, and it does a really nice job of balancing the real historical aspects and teaching you about the court case versus the story of a real couple that you can tell are passionately in love. All that they want to do is be together, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to be legally married, and they are going to fight tooth and nail to get what they deserve. Absolutely love this one, and I feel like it's one that has gone way under the radar. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody else talk about it. So if you're looking for something short that gives you a little bit of background and a really, really good story to match, this is a perfect selection. So now I want to move into some books centering around people of color or authors of color that I have not read yet that are still on my TBR. Now, really quick, I guess as a bonus one that I'm going to throw in right off the bat, I want to talk about Tyler Johnson Was Here by J. Coles. I am currently listening to this one on audiobook and very, very much enjoying it. I have just recently started Tyler Johnson Was Here, so I can't say a ton about the plot or how I'm feeling about it so far, but I am definitely going to finish it in the first half of this month, so you'll be seeing it in my mid-June wrap-up. The first book that is officially in this TBR section is Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert. Picked this one up from my library. I'm definitely planning to read it in the month of June, so you should be seeing me talk about it again at some point very soon. Now, this book actually has several different elements in it that interest me. It follows our main character, Suzette, who has been at boarding school in Los Angeles, but she has to come home when her stepbrother is diagnosed with bipolar disorder and they need a little bit of extra support at home. Now, Suzette is really hesitant to come home. She doesn't want to leave her boarding school because all of her friends and the guy that she has a crush on are all at the school, but she does come home. She wants to be there to support her stepbrother, but once she gets there and kind of settles back into her home, she actually finds herself starting to get a crush on the girl that her brother also has a crush on. Now, not only is this an Own Voices Black representation, Brandy Colbert is a woman of color, Suzette is a woman of color, Suzette is also Jewish, and throughout the course of the novel, she comes to terms with her bisexuality. So this book can actually fit in for both of the topics I'm going to be covering in this video, and that is something that really, really drew me to this book. Also, popping in, I realized I made a mistake. Her boarding school is in New England and she's coming home to LA. But this book definitely sounds like something that would be right up my alley. I am all for books about kind of self-discovery, and I love a little bit of a love triangle. So I'm definitely interested in this one. Like I said, I'm gonna be picking it up very, very soon. The next one on my TBR is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Now, this is a classic that I was actually planning to save to read later this year during Banned Books Week, but with everything that has been going on recently, I feel like I want to read it a lot sooner than that. Now, honestly, I feel like the Goodreads synopsis really summarizes this book better than I could with my own words, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you. Set in the deep American South between the wars, it is the tale of Sally, a young black girl born into poverty and segregation. Raped repeatedly by the man she calls father, she has 2 children taken away from her, is separated from her beloved sister Nettie, and is trapped into an ugly marriage. But then she meets the glamorous Shug Avery, singer and magic maker, a woman who has taken charge of her own destiny. Gradually, Sally discovers the power and joy of her own spirit, freeing her from her past and reuniting her with those she loves. Now, this is a classic that I'm honestly ashamed to say that I have not read yet. It's been on my TBR for far longer than it should have, and this is another one that is just calling to me right now. Like I said, I did way back in January plan to read this book during Banned Books Week, which comes in the fall, but I feel like I want to read this one sooner than that, so you'll probably wind up seeing this one in my June wrap-up as well. A newer release that recently came onto my TBR is Saving Savannah by Tanya Bolden. This book follows our main character, Savannah, and it's set in the early 1900s. Savannah is a member of this upper class family, and she is really, really lucky to be in her position. But when she meets a working class girl named Nell, she learns of the suffragette movement and just how she should be fighting for her rights, and it kind of sets her on a different path. Now, like I said, this is a relatively new release. It just came out in January of this year, but I have not heard a lot of people talking about this one. I've seen the cover kind of float around here and there, but it definitely sounds intriguing to me. I have not read a book about the suffragette movement in a really long time. It's been a couple of years, and even then it was a white character. I believe it might have even been set in England instead of America. So this is definitely, I think, going to be a thought-provoking take on the topic. I also want to pick up Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. Now, this one also came out in January of this year, and it follows our main character, Echo. She lives on the east side of New York, and she is actually a wizard. So I think, from what I can gather from the synopsis, portals start popping up all throughout New York City, and she finds herself going between the portals and kind of switching back and forth between her upper class private school and that side of things, and then the kind of rougher neighborhood that she comes from. So there's a snippet of the Goodreads synopsis that I want to read you that I think kind of sums up the feeling of this novel. It says, heavily autobiographical and infused with magical realism, Black Girl Unlimited fearlessly explores the intersections of poverty, sexual violence, depression, racism, and sexism all through the arc of a transcendent coming of age. So it sounds like something, again, that's going to be really up my alley. I'm always down for a coming of age story. I have heard quite a bit about this one and all good reviews of what I've heard so far. And the last book that I want to talk about for this category is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. Now, this is another story that is written in verse, and it is actually Jacqueline Woodson telling kind of a story of her childhood. So not exactly a memoir, because I don't think it goes into her adult life at all, but it is really just talking about her growing up in the 1960s and 70s and how the Jim Crow era has affected her childhood and affected her into her adult life maybe. This one just sounds really interesting to me. I've heard a lot of good things about Jacqueline Woodson, but have not yet read from her, and I think that this is the place that I want to start. So now I'm going to move over into the LGBT reads that I want to talk about. Just like we did for the other section, I'm going to talk about 5 of my favorites and then 5 I still need to read. I'm going to start out talking about Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli. I'm not going to go a ton into the plot of this one because I feel like a bunch of people have already read it, and I have made an entire video on Becky Albertalli's works. I will link it in the card up above if you have not seen it already, but I do go in depth about Leah on the Offbeat. But essentially, this book follows our main character, Leah, who is a part of the Simon verse. Simon's one of Simon's best friends, and she, in the beginning of the novel, is kind of finding that she does not really know where she wants to go in life, while all of the rest of her friends know exactly what they're going to do, and they're all kind of splintering off from the friend group. Leah is also kind of struggling with coming out to her friend group as bisexual. She is the only child of a single mother. Her mom knows that she's bisexual. Leah is comfortable being bisexual, but she just doesn't feel ready to tell her friend group for some reason. So the novel is all about her finding herself and trying to tell everybody else kind of who she is. Now, this is my favorite book by Becky Albertalli. I absolutely adored it. I love Leah as a main character, and I really appreciated the fact that she was confident in herself and in her sexuality. I feel like a lot of the times when we see a character that's struggling with their sexuality, they are trying to figure out where exactly they fit on the spectrum, but that's not exactly Leah's case. She knows right where she fits. She's just trying to figure out how to let her friend group know as well. So it was a really interesting take on the topic that I feel like Becky handled really well. And just in general, I feel like the bisexual representation in here is really solid, something that I felt that I could personally relate to. So I really enjoyed this one. Next, we of course have to mention Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Again, I'm not going to go too much into the plot of this one because everybody knows it, but we follow Alex, who is the first son of the US, and Henry, who is the Crown Prince of Wales. It is Alex's mother's re-election year, and it looks bad on her re-election campaign because Alex and Henry do not like each other. They get thrust together in hopes of forming a friendship, and they wind up forming something bigger. Now, everybody knows and loves this one, and I do as well. I feel like one of the things that I like the most about this is that Casey McQuiston does a beautiful job of combining the political aspects versus the romance. So in this book, we have representation in the fact that Alex is gay and Henry is bisexual. So we get to see a bisexual male main character, which I don't feel like we get enough of in YA or in the space in general. So I really appreciated that, and I liked the balance that she struck between the politics and everything going on in their personal lives versus their love story. So in general, this is a really great one. Everybody has already read it by now, but if you haven't, go ahead and pick it up because Casey McQuiston has a new one coming out later this year or early next year, and you don't want to be behind. Next, I want to talk about They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Now, this novel is set in a contemporary setting, maybe a little bit in the future with a little bit of a twist. There is this service called Deathcast, and it knows exactly when everybody is going to die. So on the day that you're going to die, Deathcast calls you up at midnight and says, you're going to die in the next 24 hours, get your affairs in order. And on the day that this story is taking place, we follow our two main characters, Mateo and Rufus. They wind up meeting through the Last Friends app, which is where you can go on, find other people that share the same death day as you and spend your last hours together. They do that. They wind up spending their last hours together and falling in love through the process. Now, I believe that this was the first book that I ever read from Adam Silvera, and to this day, it is my favorite. Absolutely adored this one. Again, we have representation in one of our main characters is gay, the other is bisexual, and we also have some people of color in here as well. One of our main characters is Cuban and one is Puerto Rican. Now, this is definitely a novel that I feel like takes the all-in-one day format and does it very, very well. It is incredibly well paced and it does not feel like it drags, even though the whole story only happens in one day. We definitely get a well-rounded storyline and the timing is perfect. The characters are adorable. The story is heartwarming and heart-wrenching at the same time. And it was just everything that I needed at the time that I read it. It's just this really thought-provoking contemporary with a little bit of a twist, which I feel like a lot of Adam Silvera's novels are like that. So if you haven't read from him before, I would definitely recommend it, and I would say this one is the best. Next, I want to discuss If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This book follows our main character, Amanda, and at the beginning of the novel, she has just moved to a new school. Nobody knows anything about her past, and she's ready to just kind of get a fresh start. She winds up meeting this guy named Grant that they start to kind of form a relationship, but Amanda is really scared that if she tells Grant that she was born as Andrew, that Grant will not be interested in her anymore. So Amanda is having to kind of deal with how she is going to take that on. Now, this is another book that I read almost in one sitting. Absolutely flew through this one because I just got so attached to the characters. Amanda's story was very, very compelling to me and just something that made me want to keep turning the pages. I believe this is the first novel that I ever read that follows a trans main character. I might have read one more before this, but I'm not sure. But this one does I think, a really, really nice job of bringing that experience to light. I am not an Own Voices reviewer for trans representation, so I can't speak to it personally, but I really identified with Amanda just as a teenager and some of the things that I experienced and the feelings that I felt as a teenager. So if you're looking for some trans representation or just a really good finding yourself story, this is definitely one to be aware of. For the last book in the section, I'm going to go for kind of a throwback, and that is Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alili Sanz. Now, this book just follows our two main characters, Aristotle and Dante, and we get to see them as they form a friendship and eventually fall in love. This is so wholesome and so pure, and everything that you need in that slow burn, friends to lovers, male-male romance, it is phenomenal. There's a reason that it has stuck around in the YA space as long as it has. It is so good. It is beautifully written. Our characters are so relatable and just people that you are drawn to. If you somehow have not picked this one up yet, I implore you to do so. And finally, we're going to wrap up this video by talking about 5 books that feature LGBT characters that I have not read yet. So the first book that I have on this list is the Henna Wars. I did not look up the way to pronounce the author's name before this, but you can see it here. Honestly, the first part of the synopsis is all that I really need to want to pick this novel up. It says that it's essentially a combination of When Dimple Met Rishi and Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, 2 of my favorite YA contemporaries, so I am all for this one. Now, this is a story following our 2 main characters, Nishat and Flavia, and they go to school together. They start to kind of hit it off and form a little bit of a romance, but then the school competition invites students to create their own businesses, and both girls decide to start henna companies, and they are pitted against each other in this competition. I think this is going to be really, really cute and adorable. I've seen a lot of people talking about this one, but I haven't heard any early reviews, but regardless, this sounds right up my alley. Next on my TBR is The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This one takes place in Paris, and we follow our main character, Prince Sebastian, and Prince Sebastian is kind of hiding a secret from the world. He is a prince by day, but at night he puts on his finest gowns and transforms into Lady Crystalia. Prince Sebastian's dressmaker, Francis, is one of only 2 people that know Sebastian's secret, and Sebastian is just kind of trying to find himself throughout the story. Now, this is one that I'm particularly interested in because it is a graphic novel. I don't read a ton of graphic novels, but it's definitely something that I'm wanting to get more into. And this one sounds like it's going to be simultaneously really cute and cover some more serious topics and helping Sebastian to kind of come into his identity. It just sounds in general like it's going to be a really good one. This is another that I've heard a few things here and there, but nothing major. Regardless, interested. Also on my TBR is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. Now, this follows our main character, Ben, and when Ben comes out to their parents as non-binary, they are kicked out of their home, and they wind up moving in with their estranged sister, Hannah, and Hannah's husband, who Ben has never even met before. So Ben has only come out now to his parents, Hannah and her husband, and their school therapist, and they are just trying to navigate life at this point. And Ben is really just trying to survive senior year when they wind up meeting another student named Nathan, who kind of takes Ben under his wing, and I hope that a romance ensues, but I don't really know past that. Now, I've never read a book with a non-binary character before, so that is another reason that I'm wanting to get into this one. Hopefully it'll be a good jumping off point. And it is also Own Voices. So Mason, the author, is non-binary as well. This is a debut novel from this author, so I'm interested to see what they have to say. This is admittedly one that has gotten kind of mixed reviews online, but regardless, I am interested in it, and I want to get a new perspective on somebody that I've never read from before. I also have on my TBR the music of What Happens by Bill Konisberg. Now this book follows our main character Max, who is gay and he is out and he doesn't really care if anybody knows and all of his family is cool with it, but he is harboring a little bit of a secret, something that happened in his past that he doesn't ever want to think about again. We also follow Jordan, who is also gay. The synopsis does not say whether or not he's out, but he has a lot of other things on his mind besides finding Mr. Right, and mainly his family is kind of falling apart. His mother is really struggling and Jordan is the one that's having to keep the family together. The two boys spend the summer working together on this 1980s food truck. I hope that there is a love story in here. I assume that there's going to be, and they kind of help each other navigate things that they don't want to talk about. I hope that it's just going to be a powerful and romantic coming of age story. Now this is another one that I've heard a lot of hype about from people just saying that they want to read it, but I haven't seen anybody that has actually read it. So this is definitely one that I'm going to want to be picking up. I'm not sure if this is Own Voices, and I'm not sure if this is a debut or not. I don't know a ton about it, honestly. All I know is that it intrigues me. And the last book that I'm going to be talking about in this video is Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. Now this book follows our main character Millie, who towards the beginning of the novel, she catches her sort of best friend, sort of girlfriend kissing someone else. Millie is really devastated and she has been applying to schools that are as far away from her home in Houston as possible, and she winds up getting accepted into a boarding school in Scotland. So she goes there, moves to Scotland, and come to find out her roommate is Princess Flora. So Princess Flora is the Princess of Scotland, and she and Millie don't exactly hit it off in the beginning, but then a little bit of a romance starts to come into play. This one sounds like it's going to be on the cuter side of things, definitely one that I'm intrigued by. I have read from Rachel Hawkins in the past, and I really enjoyed her Rebel Bells trilogy, so I'm hoping that this one will be just as cute. But that is it for all of my recommendations and some books that have been on my TBR. If you guys have stuck with it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Please leave some thoughts, some recommendations, some comments down below. Just remember, we want this to be a really positive and welcoming space, so keep it light down there, but I would love to chit chat with you guys. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to go down and give it a big thumbs up, as well as hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon down below so that you never miss out on any of my content. So until next time, bye!